Hello, a warm welcome back to all of you. As you know, we are looking at the topic of karma, destiny and choice, and today we're specifically taking up the subject of moral reasoning. I have the pleasure of interviewing Sister Denise, who is a wealth of knowledge and experience on the subject, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So, moral reasoning. How does it fit into the law of karma? And as I use the term moral reasoning, the conscience within the human being pops into mind.
Actually, this word moral is a problematical word because there are many instances where the voice of conscience and the voice of morality are in opposition with each other. The voice of conscience corresponds to the essential self who has a natural sense of what's right and wrong. And the conscience of a person gets corrupted by trauma. And people don't know this. So most people's conscience is corrupted, partly by trauma and partly by lack of use. So when people don't listen to the voice of conscience or they go against conscience, then it loses functionality. So this is also something people don't know. When you are unable to get clarity by consulting your conscience, this is where you start coming under the influence of the prevailing moral attitudes of the people around you in your culture, in your religious surroundings and so on. So the ideas of right and wrong created by the elite, usually males in any society, are biased. And because of that, it is not so valid. The morality was created by people who look at a human being as either a male or a female. They don't look at a human being as a spirit who is neither male nor female. Whereas the voice of conscience is nothing to do with your gender. The people who create morality also look at you in terms of your position in the hierarchy of society, and in terms of your color, your race, your wealth, your intelligence level, etc., etc. So it creates a hierarchy, and it favors those who are high on the hierarchy, and it's unfavorable towards those who are low on the hierarchy. And the hierarchy goes beyond just the human hierarchy. It also goes into the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and mineral kingdom. And this is the reason why it's morally acceptable to exploit the resources of the earth, but spiritually not. So in many areas, morality and spirituality are in opposition with each other, but people don't see it. So they think, on the whole, morality, spirituality is all the same thing. But when you look at it very closely and you question this assumption, you find that no, it's really not at all the same thing. So this word moral reasoning, because it's got the word moral in it, is a problematical expression, but yet it is known in the world of sociology and philosophy and psychology. A person has to make a choice, and it is assumed that they will compare their situation with the prevailing morality, and they will make a choice that corresponds with morality. But in many instances, their choice that they have to make makes them aware that if they follow the morality, they're going against themselves. And if they follow their conscience, they're going against the society. So if you go against yourself, you betray yourself, and you will pay for that. If you go against the society, you betray them and they will make you pay. So it puts you in a very uncomfortable situation. So the skill is to be able to satisfy your conscience and the prevailing social attitudes. And you need to be very skilled in diplomacy for that. If you are confrontational in regard to the prevailing social attitudes, you are not as strong as the large society. It's everyone against you, so you will fail. So you have to find a way to be true to yourself and still manage. And a lot of people, because they're in this either-or situation, I either follow my conscience or I follow the morality, and either way I lose out. You can't be so black and white. A skillful moral reasoning is to be able to describe and define your situation in such a way that the prevailing moral authorities that you're speaking to feel respected and that they see your point of view, and then they will step back from doing something against you. But it's a very, very tricky thing. And in many instances, you will do the right thing and you will pay for it. You also need to have this wealth of spiritual power, of pure karma, of deep spiritual knowledge, so that you are able to handle the opposition that will come to you when you want to do the right thing. We talked earlier about, great ones in the world, and great people often experience great obstacles because what they're doing is something different from the norm. And the prevailing moral authorities require you to comply, because if they feel that you're going against them, they don't like that and they will punish you. If you are very, very skilled in the art of representing yourself, which is like you have to be like a lawyer, and then you can put your case in a good way so that they will say, yeah, you're right. So in this case, we will let you get away with it. But then they still maintain those positionings. Another thing that you can see historically is in certain instances where the prevailing moral reasoning and moral attitudes or social attitudes say that, well, racism is correct, it is natural and proper to be racist, those who are of lighter colored skin are by definition more pure, those of darker colored skin are not pure, then you have to be able to undo their rationale for maintaining that position. That means you have to be cleverer than them, you have to have arguments that they cannot argue against. You also have to go against the interests that that group has in maintaining that status quo. And you know, because you're from South Africa, what took place in order to create, at least legally, the equality among races. But even then, it's still there among their social attitudes, you see. Just because it's legal doesn't make it fully acceptable in the society, right? These attitudes are the same with slavery, the same with women's inferior position. You know, these are all dictated by the prevailing moral authorities, patriarchs, from about 1,000 years ago. And it's deeply ingrained into the system, but it doesn't suit your conscience. So to shift the prevailing moral authorities and the prevailing social attitudes so that it's more in line with conscience, more in line with the laws of spirituality, is a huge piece of work. Part of what I'm about, part of what anyone in spirituality is about, is to make it clear that those ideas are in fact erroneous, and they can be dropped.
What is the price one pays for ignoring one's conscience?
The price for ignoring one's conscience is you betray yourself, which means you split off from yourself, which means you are not true to yourself. And that means you become weak, like you're bifurcated. And half a person is not very strong. So when you go against yourself in this way, the price you pay is you become a slave, because you have betrayed yourself, you've compromised yourself. So that's the price. And if you want to pay that price, be my guest. But if you don't want to pay the price, there's another price, you know. And the price of your personal freedom is very, very high.
Mm.
And you don't want to be stupid about it and make yourself a martyr or a target or something like this.
Sister Denise, you know, I don't think human beings wake up and think, how can I destroy my life today? We don't do that, at least not consciously. Other levels, yes, not consciously. What happens is that I decide I want this. Okay? I know it's wrong, but I want this anyway. You see, what is out there offers us some type of visible, in inverted commas, reward. We've got something to gain in terms of what we want, in terms of what we do, in terms of what we say. Whereas the reward offered by the law of karma is not visible. So how does one tightrope walk that? Because the outside, everything's visible.
This is why in the traditions, the faith traditions of the East, you get the Buddha saying very clearly that the cause of human suffering is desire.
A wise man, that.
Yes. And in Hinduism it is said very clearly in the Bhagavad Gita that you come under the illusion and you get deluded by sense perception and the objects of sense perception. So this is the thing. The practice is to be able to detect the intangible and to not be fooled by the tangible. Because
okay, hold on. That was very loaded. You have to expand on that. Okay, we can ask you that question in this context. It is human nature to want things for oneself. I want a better education. I want to own my own house one day, if I can. I want to own my own car. I want for my children to have a better life than I did. I want. We see it as not a vice or not doing anything bad, in inverted commas. What we're saying is, I want things for myself because this is a sign of my success. I pursue success. I'm not out to destroy myself. I'm in pursuit of a better life. And then along comes the law of karma and says, but thou hast sinned. So how do I know that I'm going off track?
First of all, I would not classify those things as desires, what you enumerated. You will say, I want an education, I want shelter, etc., etc. I want a certain standard. Okay. But as you said, these are not vices. These are rights.
Okay.
But your rights are denied by many factors. And one of the factors is the accumulation of negative karma, which acts against you. Because you're in a situation or circumstance where that right is out of reach. And we can say by calculation that it's because of negative karma. As you said, thou hast sinned, okay. But desires, in the sense of gratification of the senses, this is the real desire, you know. And this is the desire that deludes you. And this is what puts you into sin. And this is what takes you away from being able to enjoy your rights. But yet you don't differentiate between a desire that's a sense gratification and a desire that's a wish to have what you have a right to. You have to distinguish between those things. And then you have to renounce those sense gratifications, because if you take those, you take down your credit, and then you deny yourself your rights. And this people don't know.
Okay, so one's vices is directly related to your physical senses.
Yes.
I like, I want.
Mm-hmm.
And that increases one's karmic burden.
Yes.
Could you give the audience examples, practical examples of what you mean by sense gratification?
Okay, suppose you have a certain amount of money and you can apply that money any way you want. What happens traditionally, in some of my research for a project I was doing, the income of women and the income of men and how they spent it was compared in India. And in India it was said that the woman will use her income for her family. A man will use his income for himself at the expense of his family. When you do that, you become delinquent in terms of your duty, because the man is the provider, and his duty is, if he creates a family, then his duty is to sustain his wife and his children and provide for them. If he doesn't do that, and he just pursues his desires, then he is accumulating negative karma for which he has to pay, but he's spending all his credit on fulfilling his transitory sensual pleasures. He puts himself in severe debt, and he cannot pay, and the debt comes along to call him to account. He's in a mess. So when you are in this position, you have money, you have to understand what your duty is, because you have to fulfill your duty first.
Duty to?
Your duty, if you create a family, you have a duty.
Okay.
If you are a male, in many cultures, you're the earner. Females are not given the opportunity to earn money, and so the earner is responsible for those who are working but not earning. Because generally speaking, in traditional societies, the women are working without pay. But it doesn't mean that their work has no value. And if the man thinks that, well, she has to work for free anyway, and I don't have any duty, then he hasn't understood anything. Now, in the West, where after the Second World War, when many, many men had been killed and women started to do the work that was normally the area of men, and then things shifted and women found that we have a right to earn our own money, we have a right to have a house, we have a right to vote, we have a right to this or that and the other. We work just as hard as anybody else. We have a right to equal pay for equal work. The society said no. And the women said, why not? What's wrong? Oh, well, you don't need money. I do. Well, you should have a husband. Husband's gone, died, or gone off with a mistress or whatever. I have a family to look after. What are you talking about? I need money. And so this whole traditional system basically broke down because of people's weakness and because of delinquency of fulfilling their duty, negligence. And so then women started to say, yeah, and they're still saying, they're still not getting equal pay for equal work, they're still not having equal opportunities, equal rights, etc., etc. But this is because of an assumption that says, well, you know, women cannot be composers of music because there aren't any. Well, excuse me, they got deleted from the history books, that's why you don't find any. There are so many women writers whose husbands took the rights and put their name on their wives' work and got away with it because the law doesn't favor the woman in a dispute of that nature. Slowly it is changing, but many writers had to use male names in order to get published, like George Eliot, for example, you know. And so in the arts, in the professions, and so on and so forth, the prevailing social attitudes is stacked against those who are lower on the hierarchy, and they are punished for it. But you can see, in terms of awareness of the laws of karma, that this system is erroneous, is flawed, doesn't stand up.
Sister Denise, we're bringing today's episode to a close. So I need to ask you, in terms of moral reasoning and the law of karma, how do I bring both of these together in a way that serves the soul best?
What you have to do is to be very clear about what is your right, what is your duty, what is just a sense gratification desire, and you have to distinguish between all these things. Many people just don't distinguish. So you have to be prepared to split hairs so that you get it right. You have to study so that you get it right. You have to be really in tune with what is to my benefit and what is just a frivolous desire, and do not sell yourself short because of being frivolous or trivial, but really understand your own value and stand up for yourself and learn how to represent yourself, learn what your rights are, and learn to be more and more in your power, and then you will be less easily able to be manipulated by the prevailing forces which are used to manipulating people who are ignorant and uneducated and weak.
Well, that was a very in-depth discussion on moral reasoning. I'm sure I share the sentiments of the audience in saying that I didn't realize that moral reasoning and the law of karma interacted with each other so deeply. So that was quite a wealth of information. And I do like what you had to say about the conscience. It was very powerful stuff as to how important it is to look after one's conscience and not to get wrongly influenced. So thank you for that. Very special.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us at home. I hope this topic of today has given you some food for thought, and I ask you to look at your own life and ask yourself, where do you stand as far as your own moral reasoning is concerned? And Sister Denise today mentioned the conscience in great detail, and understanding the law of karma and using it to your advantage entails grasping what your conscience is saying to you at any given point in the day. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, Sister Denise. This has been a very informative half an hour. Take care and goodbye.